Welcome back to the ZERT Coffee and Chaos Podcast, the show where we talk about anything and everything relating to what it means to be a survivalist and a prepared individual in today's society. I'm your host, Chris Bartigone, ZP002. Back with me on the show today, my co-host, Jamie Franks. Jamie, as always, welcome back to the ZERT Coffee and Chaos show.
Thank you. Good to be here. Because the SHOT Show and everything, it feels like it's been forever, but I guess it really hasn't.
I mean, actually, it has. It has. We, as everyone is aware, because we talk about it often, we usually stack some shows here, and for the situation that just kind of happened, where I was unavailable for a week. I think you were unavailable because you had gone back to work, and we always try and fit it in, but sometimes life happens and gets in the way, and we can't always do it. Your schedule is a busy one at times, and I'm working on a bunch of different things myself. So yeah, it's been a minute, but here we are. And so we are actually the podcast that went up today, by the way, as we are recording on a Thursday. But the podcast that went up today on February 6th is the start of season 3, episode 101. So congratulations, Jamie. We are in the top something percentile of podcasts out there that have made it 100 episodes. So awesome. Thanks to you, thanks to Paul, thanks to all the other special guests we've had on here, and obviously, most importantly, thanks to all of you listeners who keep coming back and enjoying the information that we put out, or maybe not enjoying the information that we put out, and we like that too. I mean, we love to hear different opinions, which we always welcome. We always welcome comments. So
for sure
that you are doing that.
What's the podcast protocol? Because obviously the goal here is to attract new listeners, but we've put out like a ton of good information in shows, now I can say 100 shows ago, that maybe people haven't heard, and probably people aren't going to go back 100 episodes and listen to the old stuff that we talked about. So is there a podcast faux pas about going back and like recovering some old stuff we already talked about?
I mean, I don't think that there is. I think we can definitely go back and revisit it. I would love to go back to some of the original episodes that I did when before you had come on the show, and I was doing just audio version, and we were having Dan on, who was an employee at the time, who is an author. And I mean, we had some great conversation back then. I would love to go back and redo that episode. One of the best ways, I guess, to do it is, for all of you that are listening, obviously you know this because we talk about it a lot, but this is for those new listeners out there. If you are here, thank you for joining. But we publish our show every Thursday on Spotify and Apple, and it goes out through the Firearms Radio Network as well. The video portion of this follows a week, 2 weeks later. It's really kind of a hit or miss on that one, and I'm going to be a little bit fluid on it, but it goes out on the ZERT Coffee and Chaos channel on YouTube. So over on YouTube, we do have 2 channels that are available now. So please head over there and like and subscribe and hit the bell for both of those. One is the initial or the original ZERT YouTube channel, where we do a lot of different kinds of videos, product reviews. We do post some shorts over there on product reviews, stuff like that. And that is where some of these podcasts, or I'm sorry, the majority of these podcasts were published. But we're trying to separate those and put them on its own channel. So we do have a ZERT Coffee and Chaos podcast channel, where now all of these podcasts will go, and then shorts will go out there. And we're trying to just see what the YouTube algorithm or bots do with the information that we provide them. It is part of the new focus going forward for ZERT. Not really a new focus, but revisiting an old focus where we're using YouTube a little bit more. I know that some people have a love-hate relationship with YouTube, and we do as well, but it is a media outlet at this time, and it does provide the audience some good information. I know that I use it often to gather information, but we know that we are restricted with what we can do, and you never know when you're going to receive a strike, so to speak. So that being said,
I think all the people on YouTube that are making 10 grand a month. I don't think they have a love-hate relationship with it.
No, they definitely don't. But you
And
wonder. Go ahead.
well, I was just like, I've noticed this new trend, which is I think is kind of weird and kind of annoying, or maybe it's just me. Apparently, it is just me because these people are getting tons of views. But like, there's like a whole like subsect of YouTube people now that like the entire subject of their YouTube channel, and it's kind of like podcast format, kind of like what we're doing here, except it does seem to be exclusively for YouTube. But their entire content, it's like this guy's little YouTube channel is all about like recapping stuff that was said on somebody else's YouTube channel, which I just find is weird. That's like
Well,
people that
yeah,
post
it
about
is.
football on Facebook, and it's like if I gave a shit about what was happening on the football game, I would watch it. So
Yeah,
I don't want
I
to see you
know that.
posting.
Yeah, there are a lot of people who definitely utilize other people's channel, so to speak, or not other people's channel, like other people's information to then go and repost it, right? So this has nothing to do with what we're going to talk about today, but we always kind of get into the small talk when we start these. You know, we did a podcast about stolen valor, the 50 shades of grenades, and that one did very, very well. And it's funny because in some of the recent news, you know, he is still getting lit up, and somebody actually commented on one of the USCCA posts or one of his posts on his page that said 50 shades of grenades. I was like, I wonder. But you know, there's obviously all of that information coming out, and then all of the people that are kind of piggybacking on his whole situation are always bringing in or clipping other people's channels and bringing it in. And you know, one of the settings on YouTube is to allow other channels to use snippets of your video.
Mhm.
I don't know exactly what it's called, but you know, in my trying to understand YouTube a little bit better and how to make it a more effective tool for ZERT, I went down the rabbit hole of watching these guys talk about, you know, the top 5 mistakes that YouTube creators or channels are making, why, you know, the top 7 reasons why your videos are not getting views. And the funny thing is, not one or the other have the same information. I
Right.
mean, it's just, I think it's all just to get more clicks and more views. I spoke to a good friend of mine, Sean Heron, who is the owner of the Firearms Radio Network, and we like shooting. And you know,
Yes,
he
we do.
he cut apart one of my videos pretty constructively, and I appreciated it, and I asked for it, and you know, he gave me some homework to do, so I've been doing that homework, and hopefully some of that stuff shines through. Excuse me. Ooh, man,
Bless you.
it's one of those mornings, right? We had a technical difficulties where we lost connection, we got sneezes going on. My gosh,
It's not
it's a
even Monday.
mess. No, it's not. It's snowing here. It's crazy. The world's ending. The world is ending, folks, and you're going to see it live. Uh anyway, uh you recently shared a a post with me that contains some good information, and every week, folks, we sit here and Jamie and I spend a good portion of our time away from the camera, talking just about regular stuff, regular life stuff, you know, all the cool things that he missed at SHOT Show that he loves so much. And we always try and come up with what that next topic will be. And you know, I don't, and going back to what you said earlier about, you know, is it, what's the faux pas on going back to old episodes? You know, one of my biggest gripes in Hollywood is that they just constantly remake movies. Like they're doing another Jurassic Park rebirth. It's like, okay, are we can't come up with anything else at this point. It's going to be people running from dinosaurs. And at the end, there's going to be a T-Rex who is the anti-hero to fight a bigger, more dangerous dinosaur that we've never heard of. And that's how the movie ends, with the T-Rex reigning supreme, standing up and
Yeah.
giving the big T-Rex scream. Exactly.
Yeah.
So,
And as a lover of both movies and a lifelong fan of comic books, to your point, I've always hated how the Superman story can never move forward. they
Oh my
do like
God, never.
Superman origin story, then they'll do 1 or maybe 2 movies, and then we have to reboot it and go back to the Superman origin story again. So yeah, I get you. But yeah.
Right. Like, you look at and again, folks, we are going down the rabbit hole here of
Eh.
stuff that we're not going to talk about today, but this is just what happens. You look at those Marvel movies, and although they have really fallen off their pedestal, that first few phases when they came out everything up to Endgame was just amazing. They moved the story ahead, and DC has struggled for years. We have a new Superman coming out, a new origin story, a new Pa Kent, a new Ma Kent. We got a new Lois Lane, and guess what? It's the same villain again. It is Lex Luthor again, played by another actor. It's just like,
And
we got
sounds
to
a lot
come up
like
with a new
Shot
idea.
Show.
God, you're just a grumpy old man.
I am not. I'm not. I can back my
And
I can cite facts, but yeah.
yeah, okay. But anyway, so the post that you shared was a really good post.
It was.
And
It was very thought provoking, and it was like there was like 10 different slides, and as I'm like each one of these slides could be an hour-long episode.
oh yeah, and spoiler alert, that's what we're
Yeah.
doing, folks. We're taking those ideas that were put out there, and they were thought-provoking ideas, like Jamie said, and we're going to talk about it. Now, there were a couple that I was right off the bat, I was like, ooh, I really like that one. And then Jamie, you said the same thing. You're like, I really like that one. And so we have a few to talk about, and I kind of like where we're going to start. Because you have one, I have one. There is a ZERT page dedicated to off-road recon and recovery, that has to do with, I don't know if it has to do, actually, you know what? I guess it's a question more. Like, do you think that off-road and recovery has ties to overlanding, or is it something else? The name would lead me to believe it's not really overlanding, but
Yeah, I mean, I always like to kind of, this is the Navy instructor, master training specialist in me, but like I always like to establish my, my background in things. And long before I was ever known for being anything in the shooting world, I was not a big shot, but a little shot in the off-road community. I used to be the vice president of a nationwide off-road club, pretty well-known off-road club. And again, like before I was ever a shooting instructor, I used to actually teach classes on off-road vehicle recovery. I would go teach recovery classes and how to properly use recovery gear, and like the common improper ways that people use recovery gear, and all that kind of stuff. So what you're talking about, like, if there's a page titled off-road and recovery, I would say that's definitely good knowledge to have, but just by that title, that would not lead me to believe that it's overland centric.
yeah.
But
so I think there's two different ways, and obviously, folks, where we want to go with today's topic, and we all talk about a plan should the world become a mess, right? And we talk about what that plan includes, and we've had the conversation before. Everyone thinks they're going to go out to their vehicle, they're going to hop in their truck or whatever vehicle they have, and they think they're going to use in this apocalyptic setup, and they're going to drive off into the woods. Which, when you start to break that down, just because you have a four-wheel drive vehicle does not mean that you know how to drive in an off-road, non-groomed trail situation. If you've ever done any of that, I mean, and I'll take it back to me growing up, going to Vermont skiing and taking out the snowmobiles at the house that we stayed at. And everything looks nice on the surface of the snow, but you never know what log is underneath that snow that you are about to really fuck your day up with, because you get a skid stuck under there, and next thing you know, you are jammed underneath a log, and now you've got to pull a sled out from underneath there and get out of there.
Yeah, hope you paid attention in Jamie's recovery class.
Exactly. So and that's we're talking about a vehicle or a machine that is designed to go through snow.
Yeah.
These off-road, these trucks, your Toyota Tacomas, your Chevy Canyons, your Jeep Wranglers, uh, you're not really operating in deep snow. Um, it takes it that's a whole separate level of expertise. Mud, same thing. You know,
Yeah, and I mean, this is like we've already opened like or potentially there's so many different cans of worms just
oh
with
yeah,
contained within the statements that you've made, because I mean, just using your example in deep snow, and
yep,
I assume you're using that as an example because it's wintertime right now, but
yes,
the kind of the pitfall, if you will, like figuratively and possibly literally, if you're going to like break trail through deep snow, you have
yeah,
to know what's under it.
right,
And you may not. If it's
right,
somewhere you've been a bunch of times before, maybe you do. But if we're relating this to like some emergency situation, and you're thinking to yourself, you're just going to go off road and cross country, you have, and if it's deep snow, you have no idea what's under that. But
right,
you started off by saying just because you own a four-wheel drive vehicle doesn't mean that you know how to drive off road. And I mean, that right there, I could substitute four-wheel drive vehicle for like almost anything. Like in the Navy, we have a saying that we usually, like, new guys that try to do something and screw it up, like, we tell them, just because you shove a rocket up your ass doesn't make you an astronaut. And so, but
right.
just because you own a pair of black pajamas, that doesn't make you a ninja. Like, but
What if you have tabby socks?
well, then I'll have to reconsider. But um, this kind of goes to a bigger thing. Like, we are going to be like off road specific, but I've talked about this a lot of times. Is when I first turned 16 and I got my driver's license and I got my first car, which my first car was a Toyota truck, 1981 Toyota truck. Um, it was like a contest amongst my friends. It was something that we kind of took a measure of pride in, to see, like, to establish which one of us was a better driver. And now I think in general, I think most people don't view driving a vehicle any differently than they view running the vacuum cleaner in their house. They just view it as there's an on off switch and this is something I just have to do. And it's not something that really, most people don't really devote a bunch of time to honing a skill. And when you go off road, like, that is very, very, very much a skill. Like, I used to travel. I don't do it so much anymore. I wish I would like to get a little bit more back into it. But I used to take my Tacoma all over this country. I have been to every corner of this country in my
Yeah,
Tacoma. I've been in the desert. I've been in the forest. I've been in the mud. I've been in swamps. I've been in the mountains. I've been in the rocks. I've been, I have been all over this country, which I love. Um, and then I am not what one would call, in finger quotes, a golfer. Um, but
okay,
if anybody ever asks me to go play golf, my answer is always yes, because I'm terrible at it, but I always have a good time.
yeah, of course,
But even with just having like my understanding of off-roading and driving a tired, meaning a vehicle with tires, a
right,
tired vehicle, in all of these different off-road environments and all these different geographical locations and different challenges, you put me and another guy in exactly the same golf cart, and like, I can make that golf cart go places that the other guy can't make it go, because I have an understanding of like how these things work and how, um, you know, this golf cart has an open differential. And so if I go up this incline this way, my tire's just going to free spin. But if I can just turn it a little bit this way, I can make the open differential work for me and transfer traction to this side, and then I can make it up. And like, there really is a lot to it. And the other thing, before I turn it back over to you, the other thing that you hit on, that again could be its own little can of worms, is you talked about um driving a vehicle like in a trail environment. And so um years ago, again, when I was heavily involved in the off-road community, like, I would say I would say probably 90% of everything I did in the off-road community was Toyota centric. The off-road club that I was the vice president of was a all Toyota club. And it was a big enough club, and they had a big enough membership nationwide that we could bend the ear of Toyota a little bit. And like when we would put on, like every year we would have a big event called Toyota Takeover. And we because in this club, because it was a nationwide club, we had like different regions. And so like this year, the Toyota Takeover would be in the Eastern region. And then the next year it would be in the Central region. And the next year it would be in the Western region. And then the next year it would go back to the East. But Toyota USA would actually at the Toyota Takeover, they would donate a whole bunch of stuff to the prize table, and we would have like a big catered dinner for like the last day of the event, and that was all paid for by Toyota, and Toyota would have their some of their people there. And so then you get a bunch of us off-road nerds, and we'd be like, hey, when you come out with the next Tacoma, why don't you make it a solid axle? You guys did away with the solid axle in 1985. Why don't you bring that back? Jeep's doing it with the Rubicon. Why don't you do it? Right. And the guy's answer was always the same, and it's an answer that you can't argue with. And his answer was, because 99%, they've actually done the study, and the actual number is 99% of people who buy a new vehicle will never take it off-road.
Right.
Less than 1%. Because he said like all the off-road vehicles that you see, most of them were purchased in the secondary market, which Toyota doesn't care about. They want to sell new vehicles. They don't care about Bob's used car on Main Street. So 99% of people aren't going to take their vehicle off-road. And the last point I wanted to make real quick is because you talked about operating in a trail environment. And so that 99% of people that buy a Toyota Tacoma telling themselves that if something happens, I could take this baby off-road, you have to remember that somewhere between 99 and 100% of pictures that you've seen of a Toyota Tacoma like yours off-road was somewhere where an off-road vehicle was meant to be.
Right. So going back to one of your points there, every truck is not an off-road vehicle, right? I mean, I lived in Florida. I lived in Florida for 8 years.
Every ship is a submarine once.
Right, exactly. But they didn't make four-wheel drive 1500 Rams, Ford F-150s, Chevy Silverado 1500s. They were two-wheel drive. The big Super Duties were four-wheel drive down there, but you didn't need a four-wheel drive vehicle in the South, that you don't deal with the weather conditions that you do up here. Now, does that mean that you can take your two-wheel drive Toyota truck? And I don't know about Toyotas. I'm only I guess for me to really be sure about that statement, I'd have to look and see if that was an option in the smaller pickup trucks down there in Florida. But in the full size or the full body size pickups, does that mean that you can take that truck into the sand on the beach and you're gonna make it through there? I mean, I don't really think so. You've got to have enough torque to pull a boat down there, but I don't think you're really doing stuff off-road in a two-wheel drive truck. So
it all depends on, much like a lot of the other things that we talk about, your skill and knowledge and experience will trump your gear every time. And
but hold on.
A big thing is you have to know the capability of your vehicle and the ground clearance and all that. Because with an experienced person, a two-wheel drive vehicle would probably surprise you and probably could go some places that you would think it could.
Well, I can tell you that a two-wheel drive truck in the Northeast in New England in the snow is not going to perform like a four-wheel drive truck. And I know this because when I moved back from Florida, I had a two-wheel drive Ram 1500. Now, I can go and get all the sandbags I want from Home Depot and load them in the back of that truck for weight. It is still not enough weight. And you try and move in the snow and you are still shit out of luck. Two things. Well, one last winter, I had my current truck, which is a Ram 1500 with four-wheel drive, and it's the night package or the night edition, and it comes with 22-inch rims. Now, that is not an off-road setup by any stretch of the imagination. And last winter, I went to the
Rolling on the
warehouse.
dubs.
I went to the HQ, and I wanted to do a quick video on driving in the snow. And so I drove into about two, maybe 2 feet of snow, and I almost did not get out. From 4 high, I had to drop it to 4 low and work through that. Now, does that mean I don't know how to drive in the snow, or were there other factors? I mean, there was probably the fact that the tires were not at the condition that they should have been at the time. But again, you know, there is a skill to it. There's a skill to driving in the snow. And there's probably and then you take that skill and that's just driving on the street, guys. We're talking road driving here. There's that skill. You take that off onto a trail that, like you just said, Jamie, is designed for off-road driving. Okay, great. You still have to understand how to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you try and take that vehicle out into the woods where there are no trails, you're going to have a bad day.
Oh,
you're
yeah.
going to end up
Real
stuck.
quick.
Yeah, you're going to end up stuck. Something's going to pierce through your gas tank. Like, you're going to have a bad day.
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, if something could pierce your gas tank, like a lot of people don't think or don't know or don't believe, but like bushes are pretty stout and sturdy, and I've seen somebody try to drive over a real thick like underbrush bush, and he got his truck halfway through it, and like the density of the bush like lifted his truck off the ground, and then then he was stuck. And so I mean, yes, so vehicle capability comes into it, your knowledge and experience comes into it, but like going off of, like I said, somewhere between 99 and 100% of pictures that you see of vehicles off-road are taken in an area where off-road vehicles are meant to be, are supposed to be. And then along with that, though, it's kind of like a well-known thing that's like joked about with like memes and stuff within the off-road community is like pictures and videos never do it justice. Like, I'll take my truck up the most insane obstacle that I've ever done, ever, and the video will look like nothing. Like the video will not look impressive at all.
Yeah. Well, here's the other thing is, it's very, very dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
It's very dangerous in a couple of different ways, right? Obviously, getting stuck is not as dangerous. I mean, sure, you get stuck, you got to get the car out. But, trying to take a hill or an incline that is extra steep that you do not know how to do will cause that vehicle to tip, roll over, and now you are stuck in that vehicle. I mean, if your vehicle is not designed for that off-road type driving, then you shouldn't do it. Like I said, taking my Ram 1500 and trying to, rock scramble, it's just not, you're not going to do it. You have to have the right gear and the right skill. And this is where I'm going to kind of disagree with you. I don't think you take the best driver who knows how to do that and put them in my truck and they're able to do it. I just don't think the gear.
Well, no, I mean, obviously there's a limit to that statement, but like, guess what my other vehicle is? I drive a Subaru Outback that's all-wheel drive, but my Subaru Outback, like when I go to work and I park it next to a bone stock, like, it's not modified, not lifted, a bone stock Chevrolet truck that, that still has the original tires and rims and ride height and everything. My Subaru Outback has just as much ground clearance as that bone stock Chevrolet truck. And I have seen a lot of Jeep guys' heads go like this when I roll up to a campsite that they're like all proud of themselves, patting themselves on the back. They just made it up this trail in our Jeeps and blah, blah. And like, then I roll up behind them in my Subaru Outback with my daughter to go camping. But there is a limit to that. And again, to my point, that's also, again, that's in places where vehicles are meant to be. But even with my Tacoma, that's all built up for overlanding and it's got dual reduction transfer cases for rock crawling and differential lockers and winches and recovery points and all this stuff. If a real bad situation happened and, you know, like you referred to at the very beginning, like step one of any emergency plan is getting out, getting away from whatever. So
Right.
if some emergency happened and I tell myself, I'm going in I'm loading up the Tacoma and we're out of here. If I like where I live, like there's like a whole system of hiking trails and stuff that lead over to this uh like state park area that's all open, it's all mountains and all that stuff, but it's not meant for off-road vehicles. And if you told me I had to get in my Tacoma and not use the roads to evacuate, I don't think I would get a mile, because
right,
this terrain and this environment is not meant for vehicles, and it's not conducive for, for vehicles. And like I didn't want to jump around too much, but if part of your plan or part of your contingency plan is to drive a vehicle off road, like one of the pieces of gear you have in your vehicle, like I do, better be a chainsaw.
right.
That's a good piece of off-roading gear that that I found out the hard way. But open terrain can be very, very, very difficult. Like and most people fall into one of two categories. They either have no off-roading experience, or they have a lot of off-roading experience that has all taken place on trails and off-road vehicle areas and stuff like that.
Right.
But it, if you're not on a trail, you need to be able to pick a route through that terrain, which that's its own skill, because that comes into navigation and terrain analysis and terrain association. And when your axle breaks, can you fix it? Do you have one? I do. I carry a spare axle in my truck and have the tools and stuff to fix it. And like, recovery gear is a whole thing. You just hit on something. I forget what phrase you just used a second ago, but something about, whether or not your vehicle was prepared to go off road. And two of my most favorite things to see that are the two biggest indicators that the person in this vehicle has no idea what they're doing. I used to make fun of my friend Luke because we used to say his Jeep looked like it crashed through the performance products catalog and came out the other side with like all this shit just like hanging off it. Because he had every single possible thing you could like bolt onto his Jeep that was
out
like
of the JC Whitney catalog.
Yeah, but like none of it was really performance enhancing. It was like all for looks. But like here in Southern California, there's a lot of people with quote unquote off-road vehicles on the road, but most of it's for looks. And like the two biggest giveaways are I see
snorkel?
People with no.
I thought the snorkel would be one of them, but go ahead.
Well, I mean, as long as the snorkel is properly installed, I mean, at least that's useful. But I see people, high lift jacks is the number one thing. I see high lift jacks like bolted, like Jeep guys have it like bolted on across their hood, or they have it like, on their spare tire. And then I see a high lift jack, and then I look at the vehicle, and there's absolutely nowhere on that vehicle where you could use a high lift jack. Like if you're going to have a high lift jack, which is a great tool, when I would teach my recovery classes, a big portion of the class would be high lift jack specific, because you can use the high lift jack as a jack. You can use it as like a spreader, like kind of like Jaws of Life. You can use it you can flip it around and use it as a clamper. You can use your high lift jack as a winch, but your vehicle has to be prepped and you have to have high lift jack points. And so I see all these vehicles, trucks and Jeeps with a high lift jack bolted to it somewhere, and absolutely nowhere where you could use a high lift jack on the vehicle. And then the other one that I freaking hate is I'll see somebody with like a Dodge Ram or a Ford F-150, and it's lifted, it's got a 5-inch lift, and it's got 35 or 37-inch tires or whatever, and then they'll put a roof basket, and like the 37-inch spare tire that weighs 125 pounds
on top of it
in the basket. And it's like, I want to like wave that person over and like flag them down and offer them, I'll give you $500 right now if you can get that tire out of that basket by yourself, and then get the other one back up there. Like, and I've had to do that off road in it, because guess what? When you're in an off road situation and you need to change a tire, it's never ideal. You're
No,
always
never. Well,
halfway
I mean,
up a thing, halfway up a
yeah,
hill, so
let's
you're
just
on an
be, yeah,
incline, and you're
right, right.
and
Yeah.
like I
I
had
mean,
to
let's,
help a guy with a FJ Cruiser, and we were
yeah,
like in knee deep mud, and his tire came off the bead, so we had to change his fucking tire in knee deep mud, and he was one of those idiots that had his tire up in the fucking basket. So
yeah.
now,
Well, just to be fair, having to change a tire is never an ideal situation. So, but making it 10 times worse by not being able to access the stuff that you have
yeah,
is, I mean, there's a reason why your spare tire in a truck is underneath your truck. Because those are the bigger tires, and there's a
yeah.
reason why they're, it just it all is supposed to make sense.
But changing a tire, like you just said, it's never going to be like in an ideal situation or ideal
No,
location. But at the same time, like the dichotomy of that is changing a tire is also like the most basic form of vehicle repair.
right.
So if you're struggling with that, I've got some bad news for you.
Yeah, exactly. So, and guys, like, we're just talking about normal stuff. We're not talking about that's on a trail that Jamie was on. That's an off-road trail. You see all of these guys out there in these videos where they're taking their old school Jeep Cherokees that are probably souped up to do this, where they're taking them up these steep inclines, and then you see them get to the top, and they're struggling and struggling, and they're turning this way, and the next thing you know, they're rolling down the hill. It's like,
My
oh
good
god.
friend Josh, he actually might be one of our listeners, but so I had this little group of dudes. It was me, my friend Josh, my friend Matt, our friend Mike. Like, we all lived several hundred miles apart, but we were
Right,
like internet friends, and like we would plan these off-road trips, and we would plan like a central rendezvous point, and then we would all meet up there, and then we would like convoy to Moab, or we'd meet up in St. Louis, and then we would convoy to Hot Springs, Arkansas, and but anyway, um, my friend Josh had a Toyota Tacoma, very similar to mine, but he had this big decal made that was on the dashboard on his passenger side that said, "Hey, stupid, you're driving this home," which meant don't do the shit like what you
oh
just
yeah,
described, because
yeah,
when you're when you're dependent on your vehicle, especially kind of as we're trying to relate this to like an emergency situation or a preparedness situation, you cannot afford to take those risks. If you're in a trail buggy and you roll it 9 times down the face of a cliff, you can
right,
just load it back up on the trailer and take it home. But like
right,
when that vehicle is the thing that has to get you home,
right,
you need to be a little bit more, or
right.
a lot more conservative. And I always loved that he had that sticker on his dashboard that said, "Hey,
Yeah.
stupid, remember you have to drive this home."
So fun story. This goes back to right after high school. I moved to Myrtle Beach. I didn't have a dollar to my name, and I was moving down there to go work in a restaurant with a buddy of mine, and I ended up buying a 1980 Jeep Laredo.
Ooh, sweet.
Yeah.
The
Automatic.
Laredo
Autom
is longer wheelbase, right?
yeah, automatic. Was an automatic Jeep. Did not, I bought it for $800. Did not come with doors or a top. I ended up later getting the doors. It was white. I ended up later getting the doors. The doors were yellow. Um, but still had no top, and it had big mud hogging tires on it. And we remember a buddy of mine down there, we named her Rebecca. We named her Rebecca the Mud Hog, and we were going to go mudding one day. They love to go mud
Oh
down there in
God.
Myrtle Beach. And so we go back to these trails. I don't know where I'm doing. I don't know where I'm going. And so we're on this little trail, and we come across this, you know, puddle, which later was a body of water. Um, it was a puddle, right? And so we get out, we're like, all right, well, let's test it and see how deep it is. So we
Oh,
grabbed a
okay.
long stick, and we're jamming the stick in there. We're like, oh, okay, it's not bad. I mean, it probably shouldn't really go past the lower quarter of the rim. No problem. We're good. Plenty of
Were your
clearance.
friends' names Gordy and Teddy Duchamp and
No,
Vern?
they
No?
were not.
Okay. All
No.
right.
So we get in Rebecca, put the thing in drive. I don't even know if I had it in 4-wheel drive. I don't know if I did or not. It goes back so long. And we start going into this puddle, and we're going slow. And all of a sudden we get to the middle of this puddle, and oh God, there goes the nose of the Jeep. Like the hood of the Jeep just starts going down, and we start sinking. So whatever it was underneath the water, like we tested a little bit, but it was so wet down there. It must have been deep. And the next thing you know, we're sunk. We're down there, man. The front tires are like almost the front tires are gone. We had to sit there and kind of rock this thing back and forth. I think I ended up putting it in 4 low at that point, and we got it out. The thing was covered in
Well, you're
mud,
lucky you didn't
which was,
hydrolock it. Speaking of having a snorkel.
yeah, which was awesome. But it was all, and when we left, there was none of those fender flares, right? So we're driving and we're just rooster tailing mud all over the place. Like it was so cool. Like we got back to civilization. We were covered in mud. But anyway, it goes to my point and what we're kind of been talking about here. Like I was an 18-year-old, 19-year-old kid. I had no idea what I was doing. And yet I went out and tried it. Did we get out of it? Yes. Did we cause any damage? No. I mean, did I have to spend money to get a wrecker out there? No. But that could have been probably a lot worse because I didn't know what I was doing and I thought I did. And so I guess the moral of that story, the Aesop's fable here, if you will, is understand your limits. And we've talked about that before. We've talked about knowing what your limits are and knowing when you can push past them and how you can do that. But, understand what that looks like. When it snows here, do I go out and drive in it and test the roads? Well, I do, but I also know how to drive in it. I've been doing it for quite a few years. I don't, sometimes you don't have a choice. When I had to fly out to SHOT Show, I had to fly while it was, I had to drive an hour and a half to the airport and it was snowing out. So I didn't set the cruise at 75 miles per hour and just roll through New York like it was a dry summer day. You have to go slow. You have to give yourself plenty of time. So it's being smart. Now, all that being said, some of this stuff leads me down the rabbit hole of, the right tool for the job. I don't think I would ever, as much as I would want to, and as much as the other idea here is impossible because I don't have the said object that I'm about to talk about, but those side by sides, those Razor Polarises, whether the 4-seater or the 2-seater or whatever, that would be the vehicle that I would use as that end of days type situation, right? That's designed for exactly what we're talking about. You still have to understand the terrain association and navigation, but I think you get a little bit more leeway when it comes to its ability versus a Toyota Tacoma or a Jeep Renegade or Jeep Wrangler, whatever the case may be.
Yeah, it's not a bad thought. Again, like, the days of me driving my Toyota Tacoma all around the country to go, off-roading in Arizona for a week or off-roading in Moab for a week or whatever. But then all the while having it in the back of my head that this truck is also my ride home. That's when the UTVs became a little more attractive to me because I know guys that have like big, built up Forerunners with exoskeletons and big, Tacomas that are built up way more than mine, and they trailer them, but you need a big ass truck and a big ass trailer and all that stuff. But the UTVs, like those can be pretty easily trailered with most normal vehicles. But with that, I do agree with you that those would be a pretty good choice. Like where my best friend lives in Wyoming, it's legal for them to drive their side by sides and stuff on the road.
Yeah.
And so like I don't know off the top of my head, I don't really know what the fuel efficiency of those vehicles are, but I know when I went to see my buddy in Wyoming, we drove a long way on the road and then went off road and then went up to the top of this mountain and then hiked up to this waterfall and all that stuff and then drove all the way back. So those are really impressive, but you still kind of need a lot of the same skill set. It's still not a silver bullet. You still need to have tools and spare parts and the ability to use those tools and spare parts. You need to have recovery gear. You need to understand how to use a winch, but you also need to understand how not to use the winch. Again, when I used to teach this stuff, that was a big part of it, because a lot of people think that a winch is a silver bullet, that like, hey, I can throw a winch on the front of my Jeep and now I can go anywhere, because if I get into something that I have no business being in, I can just winch myself out. But it doesn't really, like, winches are incredibly deadly if you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah.
But talking about vehicle choice, like I used to make the joke that if you cut my arm, I would bleed Toyota blood. I love Toyota vehicles, especially for off-road, but we used to always have this conversation, like, if you had a blank check, but I told you had to go buy a brand new vehicle, brand new, can't be used, gotta be brand new, and you had to take it straight from the dealership to the trail. Like, say I'll pay for the vehicle, so you can pick anything you want, but it has to be brand new, and you have to drive it straight from the dealership to, like, let's say Moab. What vehicle would it be? And like everybody said, in North America, like, your really only choice is a Jeep Rubicon. It's the only vehicle sold in North America that comes with factory solid axles, front and rear still. So it's not independent suspension. Factory front and rear solid axles, factory front and rear lockers. The one, like the actual, like, Trail Raider Rubicon, I think they come with the sway bar disconnects and the
that's interesting.
Go ahead.
I would have chosen the Forerunner, the TRD Pro.
No, I wouldn't.
No?
No.
Why not?
If we're talking about pure off-road capability, and like I said, the stipulation is that it's a brand new vehicle, like, and you have to take it straight from the showroom to the trail, meaning like it's unmodified. A solid front axle from the factory, and like, I think the TRD Pro, the Forerunners, like you're talking about, and the Tacomas, I think they do have a rear differential locker, but the Rubicon is the only new vehicle sold in North America that's factory front and rear lockers and front and rear solid front axles. And I mean, those two things alone are a huge advantage.
Okay, so you bring up a really good point, and that's kind of where I want to touch on it a little bit, right? So the highlight or the topic of this show was, just because you own a four-wheel drive vehicle doesn't mean you know how to drive off-road. Right. And where I'm going to go with that is, let's talk about the evolution of a four-wheel drive vehicle, right? When I was growing up and we had a four-wheel drive vehicle, you had reverse, park to drive, right? Drive one, drive two. And then you had another little shifter that was 4 high, 4 low, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it was a freaking shifter that you had to do. Now, if you had to, you could put it in four-wheel drive and not go out of the vehicle to engage the lock, right? The hub.
Yeah, so like my Tacoma is a 2000 Tacoma, and I purposely specifically chose my Tacoma for a reason, because my Tacoma was the last year where I still wanted the manual locking hubs. So when I put my truck into four-wheel drive, I have to lock the hubs in, and my truck was the last year that it wasn't push button four-wheel drive. Like, I actually have a shifter to shift it into four-wheel drive. So because with all those push button things, there's electronic relays and vacuum actuators and all this stuff that can fail. But
so let me ask you, when you put that in four-wheel drive high, 4 high, do you have to go lock the hub, or can you? Okay, so you don't have to. 4 low?
No, same. Like, if
you don't have to lock it.
If the hubs aren't locked, it's really, the transmission is in four-wheel drive, but the front axle or the front differential is not engaged, so the front axles aren't going to pull.
Okay, so now the evolution here is exactly what you said. It's a very rare occurrence to find a vehicle that has a shifter lever that takes you into four-wheel drive, and then you have to go manually lock the hubs. My truck has 3 buttons 4 buttons and has a knob to turn it into drive. So you put it in drive and you are in regular 2-wheel drive. Then you've got a 4 auto. Now, when you click the button, you are still in 2-wheel drive until the computer in your vehicle realizes there is a problem happening and you're slipping, and then it engages your other 2 wheels.
Yeah.
You then have 4 high, and then you have 4 low. None of it requires any kind of locking. I don't know, obviously, how the computer works, but you would have to go in and really read the manual to understand what level of 4-wheel drive you have when you're in 4 high. When you push the button on the dashboard after you let off, and it now says you're in 4-wheel drive high.
And a lot of that stuff is neat. A little saying that I use as it relates to a lot of things is there's no substitute for experience. But
Right.
A lot of like the new Broncos, the new Raptors, like the new ones, if you actually get under them and look at the suspension on all 4 corners, the suspension, well, the suspension is where it's mounted, but maybe it's actually part of the drivetrain. But like each corner of the vehicle on the suspension has like a little computer that has all these sensors and sending units and stuff. And so now the computer, like, whereas like, in my truck, I'll have, if one of my axles is spinning, because let's back up a step. Most people that refer to their vehicle as quote unquote 2-wheel drive, your vehicle is really 1-wheel drive, because there's only one wheel pulling at the time, because you either have like a large percentage of vehicles have just what they call open differential, which is it's going to distribute power to one side or the other, but not both. Some sports cars have posit traction, and then you can get lockers and things like that I was talking about. But like way back in the day, like Army Jeeps, they were like what was called spooled, which meant they were in 4-wheel drive all the time. And most quote unquote 4-wheel drive vehicles are really only 2-wheel drive, because they're still open differentials. So if you put the vehicle in 4-wheel drive, only one of your front tires is pulling and one of your rear tires is pushing. But like in old like Army Jeeps, like from the 40s, they were actually full-time 4-wheel drive, where all 4 wheels were pulling all the time.
Well, so what's the difference between 4-wheel drive and all-wheel drive?
So it's all-wheel drive. Like, so a 4-wheel drive vehicle has a transfer case. And like you and I were talking about shifting the vehicle into 4-wheel drive, I'm engaging the transfer case, which transfers power.
Okay.
It engages the drive shaft that goes to the front axle that has a front differential, whatever. But all-wheel drive doesn't really have a transfer case. All-wheel drive is it's basically more of a traction control than
got it. Okay.
than like a 4-wheel drive thing. But it just, all-wheel drive means that the cars, like my Subaru is all-wheel drive. It's not quote unquote 4-wheel drive. But yeah, it's computer controlled, and it can distribute traction to this side and that side. But basically, it's kind of like what you were saying earlier. It's kind of like having the hubs locked in, but like not being shifted into 4-wheel drive.
Right.
Like my Subaru is all-wheel drive, but it's basically it's all the time on. I'm having a hard time like finding
that's okay.
the word,
no, that's fine.
Explain it, but it's basically like it's, you can't turn it off. It's all the time, basically 4-wheel drive, but it's distributing traction to one tire in the front and one tire in the back all the time, no matter how fast you're going. So a lot of the new modern vehicles like yours, again, like mine, that's a little bit older. I can't believe my truck's 25 years old now, but I can put my truck in 4 low, and my truck is also supercharged. I can put my truck in 4 low and just mash it, and I can blow the engine, blow the differentials, all that kind of stuff, because I'm trying to go too fast or too hard with it in too low of a gear setting.
Oh, right.
A lot of modern vehicles like yours, that have the push button 4-wheel drive and stuff, if you were to engage that 4-wheel drive and put it in low and put it in whatever, and then like mob on it, the computer systems will kick it out of 4-wheel drive. Mine won't do that. So
okay, yeah, I in all my time of having these Rams, I've had to use 4 low twice, and it was never a situation where I was, trying to get out. One was on an incline. The driveway was still covered in snow. My driveway was an incline out to a main road, and I had to get out of the driveway without having a problem. So I used it then. And like I said, when I got myself stuck last winter, which was just wild, I was like, "Are you kidding me? Is this really happening?" It definitely comes down to skill, but also this is where, like I said, that gear matters, right? Like my tires are not off-road tires. They're all-season highway tires. They're designed for that. They're not aggressive tread. They're not that kind of tire.
But and the revert, just for you guys listening, the reverse is also true. Like
Oh yeah,
you
of
might
course.
think to yourself, like, I'm gonna get these mud terrain tires and drive
No.
them to work every day because they look awesome on my
Oh God. Yeah.
Bronco. But mud tires are meant to be driven in mud, and they are not good to
Right.
drive on that. Like, you're going to
Yeah.
lose gas mileage. You're going to be loud. They're going to be terrible in the rain.
Oh yeah.
So that's a great point to bring up, is that you do need to select your tire based on where
Yeah, of
you are
course.
actually intending to be driving, not based on how
Right.
they look. But
Right. Yeah. I mean, I know that mine's a daily driver, right? Like, yes, it's a truck. I use it as a utility truck. I put stuff in the bed of the truck. I have not towed anything with it, but it's a it's a utility truck. I know that I'm not going off road. I want the tires that are going to last the longest for highway driving through all seasons. They will perform in the rain, they'll perform in the snow. There's
Mhm.
not a tire out there that is going to perform in the ice. I do not care if you have got little pointy things sticking out of it. Uh
No, that works, but
no.
it's a
Well,
yes,
barely.
it does. But
Well, dude,
you
right.
can't drive it anywhere else but in the ice. But
Yeah,
that
but
does
if
work.
you but if you look at the video, I mean, there's a video of a tank drifting on ice. I mean,
Yeah,
treads. I mean,
because
four-wheel drive does not matter on ice. You know what I mean? Like you're still all four wheels are slipping. Sure,
so
you get
there's
some
a
traction with snow tires, but
I used to know the name of it, but there's a company in Iceland, and they they purposely like modify these, and they mostly use Toyotas. That's why I'm familiar with them. They use like Toyota Land Cruisers and Toyota Tacomas,
yeah,
and they purposely modify them for driving on ice, and they're freaking awesome. But they do that. But again, the vehicles that they build up are
right. Have you
purpose built
seen?
for ice, and they actually have like the little metal studs that they put in the tires, and it does
Yeah,
work. But
have you seen the? I mean, there's a couple of videos out there. I know that the product is in production. Have you seen these little? They're like big giant triangle tank treads that you can
yeah,
drive your truck
yeah, that
up
looks
into, and it
awesome.
locks it, and then all of a sudden
Yeah,
you have like you have four treads going. I
yeah,
mean,
and
that
there's
shit's awesome.
they're awesome, and from what I've heard, they actually do work.
Oh,
But they're ridiculously expensive.
oh
But
yeah,
there's somebody, I can't think of it. Um, there's somebody's YouTube channel that I watch, and in one
yeah.
of his YouTube
Outdoor
videos, he
Boys.
had them, and I was like, "Whoa!"
Well, I mean, if you
But
watch the Outdoor Boys, Luke has that little. Have you ever seen him drive that little? It's like a little you ever see those little like Isuzu utility trucks? They're probably big overseas where they're like this little tiny thing. He's got one of those. If you ever watch his channel, watch some of
yeah,
his stuff where he goes deep into the snow there in Alaska. He's got this little white utility thing that's on four tank treads, and he goes ripping through the high snow out there. But yeah, some of that stuff is really cool, but like you said, it is very, very expensive, and probably uncalled for. Guys, as we wrap the episode up here, um we probably went in a different couple of different directions there. We mainly talked about some of this stuff for like trail driving and stuff like that, and we kind of brought it back to what that looks like in a situation where you think you may want to take your vehicle out because the end of the world has happened and you can't get through on the road, so you're just going to hop the curb and go into the woods and get around whatever obstacle is in your way. And that is likely not going to happen. And it's probably also going to likely end you with not having your vehicle for the remainder of your trek. So be smart with that. understand that, like we said in the beginning, and then we reiterated it, just because you have a four-wheel drive vehicle does not mean you know how to drive off-road. So seek out training and knowledge if you wish to acquire that skill set. So that's all I got. Jamie?
That's a great button to put on this episode. That last thing that you just said is great. And I mean, another saying that we have in the Navy is, when you're in the middle of a fight is a terrible time to realize that you don't know how to fight. So in an emergency situation, or like an emergency evacuation situation or something like that, like if you've never tried, if you're looking out your window and you're like, man, I bet I could just pull my truck off road and just cut across this field and go over that mountain. If it's not something you've done before, like, now is a terrible time to find out if you know how to do it. But yeah, like anything else, seek out a little bit of training, get a little bit of experience. In the off-road world, we used to say, like the little recycle symbol with the 3 arrows. It was like, wheel it, break it, fix it, repeat. And it's like, take your vehicle off-road, find where the limitation is, then modify that thing, and then now take it out, and then now find where the next limitation is, and then modify that thing. And that's how people build their off-road vehicles. That's how I built my truck. But yeah, if it's something you've never done before, I would highly recommend not just deciding to take your vehicle off-road and cross country, because like I said, I doubt I could get a mile and from my house if I had to go all off-road, because it's not meant for that. And so I doubt that you, our lovely listener, I also doubt you would get a mile if you just decided you're just going to tear off cross country.
Right. So. Awesome. All right, guys. Well, until next time, you stay safe out there, and we'll see you soon. ZP002 out.